June 6, 1944, D-Day. Allied forces from Britain, America and Canada launched the largest seaborne invasion in history, storming the beaches of Normandy, France. Their mission: break Nazi Germany's grip on Europe. Over 150,000 soldiers landed on 5 code-named beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno and Sword. The German defenses were fierce and the outcome was uncertain in those first hours. But taking the beaches was just the beginning. To win, the Allies needed a constant flow of supplies: bullets, fuel, food and medicine for the massive army pushing into France. The D-Day landings opened a crucial second front, forcing Hitler to split his forces. Failure would have meant disaster and a much longer war. Behind the heroism on the sand was a colossal logistical challenge. The story of D-Day is not just about the fighting, but about the ingenuity and planning that made victory possible. And at the heart of that story, one of the greatest engineering feats of the war. The Allied commanders faced a daunting question: how to supply their vast army in France. Capturing a major port seemed ideal, but the Germans had turned every port into a fortress, ready to destroy them before surrendering. Repairing a ruined port would take weeks, time the Allies didn't have. Landing on beaches was the only option, but beaches are terrible for unloading heavy cargo. Big ships can't get close, and there are no cranes for tanks or artillery. Using small landing craft was slow, weather-dependent, and risky. A single storm could cut off supplies and doom the invasion. The failed Dieppe raid in 1942 proved how deadly it was to attack a defended port. The Allies realized they couldn't count on capturing a port intact. They needed a new solution, one that seemed almost impossible. If they couldn't take a port, they'd have to bring one with them. The stage was set for a bold, unprecedented idea. The answer: build an artificial port in Britain, tow it across the Channel, and assemble it on the beaches of Normandy. This was the concept of the Mulberry Harbours, floating ports on a scale never seen before. The idea took root after the Dieppe disaster, championed by Winston Churchill himself. He demanded a system that could land supplies on open beaches, no matter the tide or weather. The plan: 2 Mulberry Harbours, one for the Americans at Omaha, one for the British and Canadians at Gold Beach. Each would have a breakwater made of massive concrete caissons and sunken ships, floating piers and pier heads for unloading cargo. Trucks and tanks could drive straight from ship to shore. It was a revolutionary concept, an entire port built in secret, ready to be assembled in a war zone. The Mulberries would become the Allies' lifeline in France. Their success would change the course of the war. Building the Mulberry Harbours required genius and grit. Civilian and military engineers, led by visionaries like Professor J.D. Bernal and Brigadier Sir Harold Werner, coordinated the effort. The massive concrete caissons, phoenixes, were floated across the channel, then sunk to form the breakwater. Steel whale roadways, supported by beetle floats, connected the shore to floating spud pierheads that rose and fell with the tide. Over 200 companies and tens of thousands of workers built the components in secret, often not knowing what they were making. The project consumed huge amounts of Britain's steel and concrete. These unsung heroes, welders, carpenters, labourers, worked around the clock. Their skill and dedication made the Mulberry miracle possible. Without them, D-Day's success would have been impossible. As D-Day neared, the Mulberry components gathered in secret along England's coast, a floating armada waiting for the signal. Operation Corncob began. Tugboats towed the massive caissons and roadways across the channel at a crawl, vulnerable to attack and storms. Air cover protected the convoys, and timing was everything. The first pieces had to arrive as the beaches were secured. Old ships, called gooseberries, were sunk to form a temporary breakwater. Then, engineers and Navy Seabees raced to assemble the main harbour, sinking caissons with precision, connecting floating roads to pierheads. All this happened under enemy fire, and in treacherous tides. The work was dangerous, the conditions brutal. But the Mulberries began to take shape, right on the battlefield. It was a feat of engineering and courage. Once assembled, the Mulberry Harbours transformed the invasion. Where there had been only open sea, now stood two vast man-made ports. Ships could dock, unload, and send trucks, tanks, and supplies straight to the front. The harbours operated day and night, lit by floodlights, buzzing with activity. At their peak, thousands of tons of cargo and hundreds of vehicles landed daily. The Mulberries gave Allied commanders the confidence to push forward, knowing their armies would be supplied. They also brought in reinforcements and evacuated the wounded. For soldiers, the harbours were a symbol of hope and Allied power. The Mulberries were more than steel and concrete. They were the beating heart of the invasion. They kept the Allied advance alive. The Mulberry story is full of ingenuity and grit. Phoenix caissons were complex, with sailors risking their lives to sink them in rough seas. Each had anti-aircraft guns to defend against attacks during the crossing. On June 19th, a massive storm struck, the worst in 40 years. The American Mulberry at Omaha was destroyed, but the British Mulberry at Arromanches survived, battered but vital. Engineers salvaged parts, repaired damage, and kept supplies flowing. The surviving harbour, Port Winston, handled far more traffic than planned. The people who built and operated the Mulberries, engineers, sailors, seabees, were unsung heroes. Their creativity and bravery kept the lifeline open. The Mulberry Harbours solved the Allies' greatest challenge, supply. In the 100 days after D-Day, the surviving harbour at Arromanches and the beaches enabled the landing of over 2.5 million men, 500,000 vehicles, and 4 million tons of supplies. This overwhelming force broke the German defences and fueled the Allied advance. The Mulberries turned the tide, making a rapid breakout from Normandy possible. Without them, the invasion could have stalled or failed, especially after the Great Storm. The Germans were stunned by the ingenuity. No one expected the Allies to bring their own port. The Mulberries were a war-winning weapon, as vital as any tank or battleship. They proved that innovation and engineering could decide the fate of nations. The floating harbours were a triumph of Allied imagination. They tipped the scales of victory. The Mulberry Harbours were built for a temporary need, but their legacy endures. Port Winston at Arromanches operated for 10 months, far longer than planned, until Antwerp was captured. The remains of the harbour still stand on the Normandy coast, silent monuments to Allied ingenuity. These relics draw visitors from around the world, reminders of the scale and daring of D-Day. The Mulberries taught the world new lessons in logistics and rapid engineering. Their spirit lives on in modern military and disaster relief operations. They proved that no problem is too big for imagination and teamwork. The floating harbours were the bridge between hope and victory. They honoured the quiet work of thousands who made liberation possible. The Mulberry miracle stands as a symbol of how thinking and building won the war.